Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. JP here. Today, as always, I start off by saying I'm very excited to speak to because we have global educator and just general superstar from my point of view, Dr. Perry Nickelston. Welcome.
Thank you so much, my friend. I truly appreciate that. It's great to be on the show.
And the reason it's kind of exciting for me as well is like a lot of my students have either go on to do your stuff or have done your stuff and then come and play in my world. But also some of your stuff is part of my daily routine. So
Great.
it's funny because you've affected so many lives, and you don't necessarily talk to people and go, oh, right, I'm actually doing your thing. Like the big six I do every day, for example. That's and just as an FYI, we'll talk about the big six, but that's a lymphatic protocol that you created, right, and have trademarked as well. So you travel the world, you're a global educator, you've got a huge body of work online, but to give people an idea of who you are and how you go about things, I thought it'd be quite funny to quote you to you. So
Okay.
I'm gonna kind of say a few things that you've said in your posts, and also there's one that I remember from years back that I actually still drag up because so few people use it, which is
Mm,
that it was something along the lines of, there is no relationship between being serious and being good at what you do. And it was
yeah.
a huge relief that someone else on the teaching circuit said something like that, because I use a huge amount of humor, like, and very spontaneous humor throughout my teaching experiences. And I always believed that it added something to the experience. And then down the line, I did the research, and of course, it actually enhanced the learning of those students. But you said
Mm.
it too, and it was just like somehow it just bolstered my confidence. So thank you for saying that. I mean, do you find that there's a lot of people out there that they become so serious and earnest that it's almost like some of their stuff doesn't get taken up?
Yes, absolutely. And honestly, I wish I could take credit for that quote, but I can't remember who actually said it first because I'm an avid reader. I read all the
Mm,
time and I write stuff down in my journal and even say it into my phone when something resonates with me. And
mhm,
that one really did because I was like that. And early on, when I was trying to get into teaching and find my voice, I began to try to, how it goes, you mimic a lot of other people.
mhm.
And I thought, well, I'm teaching medical stuff. It should be serious stuff. But it really wasn't me because I wasn't
Yeah.
bringing myself to it. And then what I discovered as well is that, people were initially attending my classes and courses, but that didn't mean that they were walking away with remembering anything and actually finding value in what I was doing. Because I also learned when I was teaching that it's not just about the information, it's about the connection that you make
Mm,
to the human beings and the people that you're teaching, and you're trying to inspire them to reach other people. And
mm,
and that's I think a lot through story and through humor. And I'll be honest with you, in the world of healthcare, especially when I got into people that had some really serious health issues, and it
yeah.
started with my own, people were so deadlocked in this doom and gloom and seriousness from
Mm,
people. And that was one of the reasons that I found that they were actually swimming in what I call the quicksand. They were just
yeah.
not getting better because everything was so serious. So from that point on, I just started to be me. I started to have more fun, tell more jokes.
Mm.
And when you know it, people started to have a lot more fun too.
And I guess a lot more people actually recommended your education as well. I mean, that's the thing. You're having a good time in the room, as well as learning a heap of stuff that you're passionate about. So let me give you a few things of you so that people can get a flavor of you if they've kind of not really, they know who you are but not really connected with what you do.
Mm.
Here's a great one for the movers. You can become so obsessed with how you move that you lose the ability to move naturally. And there's another one, not the fruit, the root. Nurture the root, fruit will happen. The body carries an intelligence that exceeds the understanding of your intellect. You must
Yes.
look at chronic mental stress as physical injury to the body, because it is. This one we've used as the title. The human body is under no obligation to make sense to you. It's always got a plan. Survival. More isn't better. Better is better. It's very easy to overwhelm an already overwhelmed nervous system. Pain is not punishment. Pain is protective. It's telling you to change something. Your habits and behaviors are good places to start. And it just goes like, there's just, honestly, I reckon we could do an hour just of your quotes just going. There's just such innate intelligence just in all of those. But let's go with some of those things. So as an
Good.
example, you go, okay, then the human body is under no obligation to make sense to you. So we should start with that one, really. I love that, because there are so many people that come in and they're so frustrated by, I can't find what it is that's the thing that I need to change, or the thing that I need to, move, or the thing that I need to press on, and then it just takes all the pressure off. Like, all right, well, it doesn't have to make sense to me. I can just keep exploring, I mean, with that quote, what does it mean for you?
Very similar. And, that's kind of an offshoot from a quote that I read initially from Neil deGrasse Tyson, who he said in an interview once. I was reading the written transcript, and he said, "The universe is under no obligation to make sense to you, because humans are looking up in the sky and trying to make sense of it, and you never will. That's the point." And I said, well, the human body is its own magnificent universe that, we can't even begin to contemplate what it's about, even though we try to make sense of it. And it's actually quite silly because, in our attempts to understand it, we get more wrong than we do get right. And that's how science works. What we think we knew
Yeah.
yesterday as fact turns out to be, oops, we completely got that one wrong. Or we discover new things that we never thought possible before. And the humans love to try to bring logic and make sense of everything. And I always thought that was funny, because the body's like, I'm just going to keep doing my thing, whether you understand why I'm doing it or not. That's on you, honestly. And if you can't find a double blind research study to prove it, I could care less, because my job is one job. That's to keep you alive and not dead. And I'm going to do whatever strategy I need to accomplish that task, whether it makes sense to you or not. And that does take a lot of load off. And you also don't have to take yourself so seriously, but you can also trust that it's okay if it doesn't make sense. Your body ultimately always has your back.
You said something in there that, again, you're one of the few people to say that. I find myself saying, and I get a little bit of flack for this. I find myself saying, hey, you know what? I don't need a scientific paper to tell me that this works. The fact that this works tells me that it works, right?
Yep.
I get a bit of flack for that, because unless we're based in science, how can we possibly be a reliable source of information and a reliable practitioner? Whereas you've
Mm.
just said exactly the same thing in your own words. So do you find that frustrating?
I used to, but I could care less anymore
Mm.
about that, whether somebody likes it or not. Because here's the thing: the people that end up coming to see me are the worst of the worst, and they've tried everything that is quote unquote supposed to work or been proven by science and what all the research says, and they're not any better. So then what do you do? Well, then you have to start to do things differently. And the first thing you have to start to do is to think differently, right? And so you have to step outside of that box of, and listen, If you knew in the history of how much science gets it wrong, you wouldn't trust it as far as you could throw it in relationships to healthcare,
Hmm.
right? Oh, because I see it all the time. It's like we mentioned a little bit before, things that we thought were fact are not.
Hmm.
Things that we said were impossible turned out to be possible. And I say this all the time, science I trust, people I don't.
Yeah.
That's the people that run the science, because there's
Okay.
always an agenda on their part. And the research stuff is so damn corrupt, it's not even funny. And research is usually 15 years behind clinical practice of what's actually out there. And research is so myopic. They're looking at very specific parameters and circumstances of, people or cases or norms. And I'm like, well, good luck with that, man, because that's not what it's like in real life. It doesn't exist. So you have to take the individual human being that's standing in front of you. And if the individual human being standing in front of me wasn't part of your research study, I really don't care too much about your research study, because the rules might not apply to them. And they usually don't, because if all that stuff that was supposed to help them was going to help them, then they wouldn't be standing in front of me asking me for help and to look at them and do something completely different. So I
And
work on the fringes, honestly, and that's where I like it, because that's where you learn the most.
well, you work just ahead of the curve, which is that space of the unknown, but it's what I find also incredibly exciting. Uh, Again, like you mentioned there, like we're working, if we're sticking rigidly to the science, we're working in the past, and I want to work in the now.
Yeah, and I got no problem with science. I mean, I follow it too, but I'll be the first to throw it out when I need to as well. And I have people that come in and have problems with the placebo effect. But oh, it's just a placebo. I'm like, well, I certainly freaking hope so that it
Mm.
is, because the placebo effect works,
Hmm.
man. I mean, it can really drive you to be sick, or it can drive you to be well. But what's even more powerful than the placebo effect is what medicine is great at, called the nocebo effect,
Hmm.
which is the words that they say, the language that they use, the tone that they have, that the nocebo effect is where all that stuff makes you sick.
There was
It's
an
just the
interesting experience I had in hospital recently. I recently managed to fracture. I did a multiple fracture and ligament tear in my lower leg, right? And
mm,
went into the hospital just to go, okay, then what is going on? Because I needed X-rays and scans and stuff, right? And and the number of staff in one of the hospitals, I went to two. One hospital, it was like, oh, you're young, you'll get through this really quickly. I'm 54. You're strong, you're fit and healthy. It's obvious you're going to be fine. You go to the next hospital that does more investigative work, and it's like, well, you're getting older, or you shouldn't really be, being. I was running playfully around a corner, right, when it all happened. You shouldn't, you're probably getting past that kind of stuff. I'm thinking, I'm 54 and I've got four young kids. I ain't past anything, right? So the language, and I was thinking, if that's the language that they use and people can't see beyond that, then another 54-year-old might go in there and go, oh yeah, I suppose they're right. I should be slowing myself down. I shouldn't be trying to do these things. I shouldn't be as energetic and physically playful with my kids as I was, because I might hurt myself again in the future. And it was incredible, the language that was being used and the attitudes that were being used just from the staff, just being themselves. I'm like, wow, what 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 are we giving as a message to society if that's what happens when anyone has an emergency issue?
yeah, I mean, language is critical in relationship to healing. And listen, I have to keep this in context too, right? I mean, I'm in the world of chronic pain, chronic disease, lifestyle disease, autoimmune disease. I'm not in the world of acute traumatic care. Like, if you get shot or stabbed or your arms hanging off, you'll go to the hospital and you'll take all the science you need so you don't die.
Totally.
I'm down with that, but you're not
Me
coming to
too.
see me if that's happening. So what I'm doing now is I'm looking at the track record of conventional medicine in relationship to chronic pain, chronic disease, and autoimmune disease. I wouldn't follow them for anything because they're awful at it. How do I know that? Because people are getting worse, they're not getting better. So why in the hell am I going to follow that model? I'm not, right? So it's even more along the lines of what I'm not going to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
So, and,
Because
and I'm with you on that. For acute issues, I don't want to be anywhere but in that medical sphere because they're, like you say, they're great at it. You know, I remember I remember Billy Connolly doing this great little skit where he says like, hey, you come across an accident and people have got limbs hanging off, and someone needs, blood transfusion, there's urgent care needed. At that point, you don't hear anyone at the back kind of bustling through saying, let me through, let me through. I'm an aromatherapist, right?
right.
Because it's not what you need at that point in time. Very powerful in other spheres, but not what you need at the time. You want someone with that acute training. So, you mentioned there autoimmune disease. Now, I remember I've been on the teaching circuit for a while. I remember you being at the conferences that I was teaching at, and you were very focused in on more that whole movement solutions to body issues, but then you had a health event yourself, and you've been through an autoimmune issue, and then for me it was obviously amazing for you because you've come out with a whole heap of other courses as a result of that. But tell me, I don't know the detail of what you went through from an autoimmune perspective. What did you have to deal with?
Uh, Pretty much everything. Honestly, people ask me what my autoimmune diagnosis was. I never really got a specific label or name. And I'm
Mm,
actually grateful for that because
yeah.
people often become that label
Hmm.
and then they get everything that they're supposed to have because they now have that label. So it traces back once again to language and your words. And then all of a sudden, oh, I got this symptom now and that symptom now because you were told that you have XYZ. It felt like I had all of them, honestly. And at this stage, I don't really look at a diagnosis that much because to me, it all comes down to chronic inflammation. So that's all I'm taking care of is chronic inflammation. And the diagnosis at that point to me is irrelevant. And so I would do the same treatment plan for chronic inflammation no matter what it was. But the reason that I started doing different things beyond the movement-based world is because the movement-based approach was not what I needed to help me with where I was in my autoimmune disease. I'm not saying that that's not important because many people can do movement when they have autoimmune and feel much better because they're not moving now. Does that make sense? So it was just by the nature of almost like the scientific theory and deduction. Okay, what did I do here? And then what was my result over here? And so the movement wasn't moving that needle for me. The things I had learned about neurology and pain and the brain were not really changing the needle for me either. And I was getting worse. And I said, okay, this is where I have to completely change my thinking process. I have to go like Steve Jobs here,
Yeah.
Apple, think different, the famous commercial. And so I said, well, what pathway have I not been looking at? And I really wasn't looking at the immune system component of my autoimmune disease. I was looking more from the nervous system component. Now, those two systems do work together. The nervous system, they all work together, first of all. I always say that. The nervous system and the immune system, they call the neuroimmune connection. But I was all about the nervous system, not so much the immune system. And that brought me to go down the rabbit hole. I'd never even thought to look there over my career because why would I? I was a musculoskeletal guy.
Yeah.
Turns out, because of my illness, that holy cow, an inflamed immune system can cause chronic musculoskeletal pain like crazy.
Mm.
I think that my autoimmune disease and my suffering was the was sent to me to discover that fact. Like
Yeah.
that's the only way I was going to discover it, by being in the quicksand myself.
Mhm.
And that's when I came across the role of the lymphatic system and really focusing on the lymphatic system. And when I did that, I've noticed a drastic improvement in my chronic inflammation and my autoimmune disease, which helped me recover. And then that had the ricochet effect of also helping me with some regular chronic musculoskeletal pain issues that I was dealing with up to that point that were not improving just from doing movement and neurology based stuff, because the underlying immune system inflammation was inflaming the musculoskeletal system. So that would lead me on the path to say, okay, uh, I cannot be myopic anymore and just look at one area of the body, which is what Stop Chasing Pain was. But I was still in the world of musculoskeletal
Yeah.
Stop Chasing Pain. For instance, like if my knee hurt, I knew to look at my hip and my ankle, which for many people, they don't even know that. So that's a big deal.
Yeah.
But I really wasn't looking at, well, maybe my immune system has something to do with my knee pain. Right. And that's when I said, okay, uh, the system that I've been doing up to this point got me to that point, but it failed. And then when I started looking at other people, holy cow, they're going through the same thing. And that was the light bulb moment for me, because you have all these really skilled practitioners and all these really skilled and talented and gifted and giving healthcare practitioners, but they're stuck in categories, and
Yes.
they're really good at looking at specific things, but that's not going to get you very far, honestly, when somebody is in chronic pain and autoimmune disease, because it's never just one thing. It's a lot of things mixed together. And it reminded me of that great cartoon when you'd see like this elephant cartoon and all these different people are touching a different part of the
Oh,
elephant,
yeah.
and they're telling you it's a completely different thing based on where they're touching. That's
Mm.
kind of what healthcare is like.
Yeah.
So now I look at the whole damn thing. There is not one part. And that was honestly the biggest discovery that I needed to find. And I did find through my own suffering. And that's when I came out of the matrix, honestly,
Yeah. Yeah.
at that moment.
And that's, I mean, we've been on a similar journey in terms of, starting off. I was very much uh, a guy who was a mover and moved people according to, the whole kind of that whole neuromyofascial system approach.
Yeah.
So like you, it would be like if someone had knee pain, the knees, the last place I'm going to look for knee pain, of course, because I know that something is overwhelming the knee. So let's look at what that might be doing. And if you understand the physical system as a system of elastic bands, then you can look at what these elastic bands are doing. But then, like you also, there were people that you couldn't help. And it's like, well, this has been quite useful with all of those people. How come all of these people? And that's when it sets you off on a path of like, well, it's got to be more than that. And then before you know it, you've stepped back from the elephant and you're taking in the whole picture, but you still need to know about each of the parts. But you need to understand but how they're all connected. Like my classic thing for my students is everything's connected to everything. And I don't just mean, the right big toe to the left thumb. I also mean, all the systems and your mind and your emotions, it is all connected in and wired in with each other. So there we are. We've got to this place where we can stand back and look at all the different parts of the jigsaw. But that doesn't mean that if someone just starts doing that today, that they're then going to have the ability to see how they're all connected. They've still got to understand each of the parts. And that's where you come in, because you've then gone, okay, then I've taken a step backwards. I'm looking at the whole thing, but now I need to adjust my lens into different areas that might need more attention. So you've got,
Mhm.
you've got the big six lymphatic protocol. I know you've got all your kind of mojo education, Glymph Mojo. You've got vagus nerve mojo. You've got a nervous system mojo. You've got a breathing mojo. You've got a blood flow mojo. You've got
Mhm.
a gut mojo. You've got a tongue mojo, for goodness sake. So you've got all these different elements of education, and I'm guessing, like me, it's really difficult to be in one and then not mention all the others.
Yeah, you really can't be in one. They're all taught. They can be learned individually, but they're meant to be a connected series, like the human body. So it was perfect the way you said that. Is you have to take a step back and look at all the different systems or the different parts of the elephant that
Mm,
that could be involved, and that actually all are involved,
hmm.
but to what extent, right?
Yeah.
So those areas that I teach a mojo course in, for instance, like lymphatic mojo, breathing mojo, blood flow mojo, gut mojo, all those, okay? Those are all pieces of the systems that we have to evaluate on someone when they come on in to see,
Mm,
okay,
mm,
out of all these systems, I know blood flow is going to be a player. Is it the biggest player?
hmm.
Right? So the first thing is just to know you should check blood flow, right? You have to check the blood flow box. Then if you find that blood flow is an issue, well, then here are the strategies and the techniques that you need to be able to change that blood flow. But then I also need you to understand, well, how does the blood flow tie into the vagus nerve?
Hmm.
Well, it's going to tie into the vagus nerve because the vagus nerve and your sympathetic nervous system are going to influence blood flow overall in the whole body. So then you have to see, well, is it a vagus nerve issue? And what you're probably going to find out is the answer is yes. And is it a blood flow issue? The answer is going to be yes. It's going to be both, but which one do you go after first, basically? Right. So that's my favorite part is the relationship and the interactions between all of the other systems, like the pieces of a puzzle. So you really understand how the body physiology itself as a complex system
Yeah.
actually works. And that's where a lot of my stuff I learned from studying complex systems theory.
Okay.
But you find that a lot in engineering and physics. So that
Okay.
helped me a ton when I just stepped out and didn't think so much from a medical approach.
Mm,
I started thinking more honestly like an engineer and somebody in physics so I could see relationships and interactions with each other. And that's the complicated part of the body because many things that people are chasing are downstream issues that are not the true issue. They're just compensation issues for something that happened 15 steps earlier that you didn't catch because you're too busy chasing all the endpoints, not the first
yeah.
domino.
Yeah.
And that's what happens in the world of chronic pain. And that's the part that I enjoy most because I love the complicated cases. I love the ones that didn't respond to what should work because that forces me to really have to think differently. Think I don't even have a box. I don't even say outside the box because I don't have a box anymore.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, because then that's what you have to do. And then you say, well, I wonder if this and how this connects to this and this. And then that's when you discover all of these things. And trying to deal with those really, really complicated cases were so helpful because that helped me get to the people uh, early on in the process before they became a really complicated case. You know what I mean? Because it's stuff that's there that has been overlooked and nobody's looking at it yet. Like, for instance, the lymphatic system is one. You don't have to be a hot mess in your lymphatic system for your lymphatic system to take you out 10 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'm trying to catch it now before you get to that standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's just you knowing that, holy cow, doc, thanks, man. I never even knew about the lymphatic system. Exactly.
Mm.
So I came across this great book once. It was called it was one of my top 5 books that I recommend. It's called The Checklist Manifesto. You ever heard of that one?
No, I haven't.
Your listeners should get that, and you should get that. It's called The
I'm
Checklist
getting it now.
Manifesto. I can't remember the author's name, but he's in the health care field, and he
Yeah.
worked in hospital setting, and he started to learn these steps that you would have to put people through to do checklist of basics and fundamentals to make sure that nothing was overlooked. So his example was an operating room, to just put a checklist of, did you wash your hands? Yes. Do you have gloves on? Yes. Did you do a last minute check for instruments inside the patient? Yes. Like all these things that people are just like, I know all that stuff, or that's so simple, it's so stupid. Even the doctors were giving pushback on that, but they were having so many medical errors and people were dying because of all these mistakes. And once they started to implement just a simple checklist to make sure that you looked at something,
Hmm.
whether it was an issue or not, that they made like a 70% improvement in their outcomes. And they use the same kind of checklist every time you do a flight, right? They have,
They do.
the stewardess here? Yes. Is the food here? Yeah. Is the pilot here? Yes. Is there a wheel? Are the wheels there? Yes. Like you're just going through a checklist. So that's what I do now when I work with people. I go through a systems checklist to say, is this an issue? Yes or no? And if it's a no, well, that's perfect. Then remove that piece off the chessboard. I don't have to worry about it. So I can move on to something else. But what I found is that many people are not even checking all the boxes because they're going right for their box.
Yes.
Or what the biggest mistake is, they're going for the diagnosis box. I'm like, well, maybe your diagnosis is wrong from the get-go.
Mm.
What about that? And that happens a lot.
Yeah.
And then, so once I check these off, and then I find the biggest player, I go after that. Because if you miss that biggest player, you're going to struggle,
Yeah.
because everything else is just the body's way of trying to compensate until you get smart enough to find the right checkbox.
Because you don't know, like you may have this long list and you may have what you would call the big dogs in the room at the
Yeah.
top of but you don't know that it might be box number 30 for this particular case or client or patient. It depends on who you are as a practitioner. And if you don't, you say, oh, well, I've not really found it with any of the big stuff. So, a small thing, what I think is a small thing, it won't
Mhm.
be significant enough to have this effect on a person. And then you get there. I mean, I've been an hour in going, oh God, I don't know. Oh, hang on, we're, okay, then we'll check this. And then it's like, whoa, it was that. And I've
Yeah.
been surprised, right? Because, so I'm similar to you. The only people that come to see me these days are the people that have, been seen, what I say is like everyone and their dogs had a go. So now it's
Yeah.
time for JP to have a bit of a look with it, and stand back and look at the whole elephant, as it were. But sometimes it is the small things that have these massively significant effects.
Exactly. And once again, I'm going to take that back into the world of complex system theory and physics. They call that nonlinear relationships. So
There you
in
go.
in medicine, in healthcare, we seem to look for linear relationships. We think that, you know, whatever the input is at A, will be a straight line out, and you'll get the same output at B. What that means is if something big happened here, then something big happens over here. If something small happens over here, then something small happens over there. That's not how the body works. The body is nonlinear. It's usually something small that can have a catastrophic, big, huge thing on the opposite side. But everybody's chasing something big on the front end because there's such a big thing on the opposite side.
Yes.
And that's where they miss it. And that's where you get that from your history. That's mostly where you're going to get it, because your patient will tell you what it is, because most people just disregard what the hell the patient says. And they don't do a hands-on evaluation. They don't touch the body and feel the body, which is a lost art in medicine. And that angers me more than anything, because they'll send you for $10,000 worth of tests before they put the damn hands on you. And the stuff that you're never going to find on a test that you're only going to find with your hands and your interaction with the client. Like a nonlinear relationship is breathing.
Yeah.
Like if you have a dysfunctional, I don't even like the word dysfunctional, but maladapted breathing pattern, and a diaphragm muscle, for instance, that might be tight and restricted, or you are a chronic mouth breather, that's going to be a catastrophic, nonlinear chronic inflammation on the back end that's going to keep you from getting better or will take you out. And if you don't ask about that and look at that, then you're just going to be in the quicksand. And then that's the people who put you on all these different types of things, but they missed that in the beginning. First of all, because they probably didn't even know there was a checkbox for that. Think of the nonlinear one. But I also look for results. Like, listen, if you give the body what it wants and what it needs, it'll tell you quick, fast, and in a hurry if you got it right. If you don't give it what it wants, it's going to tell you that too. So I don't believe in this 3 times a week for 4 weeks, 3 times a week for 12 weeks crap to notice a difference in your body because it takes time to get better. Poppycock. That means you're missing something. You're wrong. So that means that if I'm going after something all this time and the body keeps putting something back in to protect itself, I'm missing something. So that automatically tells me that I have to step back, re-examine the pathway that I'm on, because I got a little piece of something, but it's not the something that I need to be at. Does that make sense? So that's how I know. So that's why I have something that I tell every one of my clients is that when you come in to see me, I need 4 visits to really get to what's going on with you. If I don't make a change to how you're feeling in 4 visits, there won't be a 5, because I can't help you. Like, I'm going to find it in 4. The reason being is I'm never going to do the same thing twice unless I hit the bullseye on the first shot. Because that's going to say, how did you feel? Well, not that, right? Then I know I'm going to just tweak something a little bit different next time, move the puzzle pieces around, and then until you tell me this, right? And then, for instance, lymph was a big part of that. Like once I started to work on lymphatics, see that actually is a big, I call it a big rock, but you don't have to have a massacred, huge lymphatic system problem to have a big problem on the back end. You could have just one small isolated region of the body with congested lymph. But that's going to give you a non-linear result on the back end. But many people might not pay attention to that one small area of lymphatic congestion because it's one small area of lymphatic congestion. And here's the real kicker. It's not near where your physical complaint is. So, for instance, they say, well, I'm not looking at the lymph node over here because you're complaining of pain over here. Yeah, that's exactly why you should be looking over there, man. Because everything is interconnected and you're doing what you're not supposed to do, which is chase pain.
So let's look at that. And like you say, like, okay, then we want to look here for here, and you'll have your go-tos quite often. But also for me, there's also those ones where, okay, then we've got this thing that's showing up physically in the body. There's something is going on, and you're looking through and you're like, well, that seems pretty good. Okay, then we can all improve and you're not really finding anything significant as you go through the list. And then you get into that mental and emotional world.
Mm.
And then things are playing out physically in our body that you can't see or touch, i.e., the root of which you can't see or touch. If it's a thought or an emotion, you can't see and touch that thing, right? So it's happening underneath. And for me, researching what I wanted to do, I wanted to look at how do I show the relationship between this thing that you can't see or touch and how it becomes a physical thing in their body. And once I could do that, I found that it was a much easier conversation to have with people rather than just go, well, your emotions are playing out in your body, man.
Mm.
That wasn't
Mm.
enough. It was like, okay, then well, this is having this, and this is creating this, which is then the knock-on effect of which is this. For you, how do you quickly get onto the idea that with certain people, this is most likely a mental emotional issue?
Well, there's
It's
always an
underneath all the
emotional
things,
issue. Yeah. Yeah. In my world, emotions are always playing a role in
Yeah.
whether you are understand that yet or not. Uh, it is. And I
Mm.
can say that because of the patient base that comes to see me.
Yeah.
Like you're in a really bad spot, man, when my name crosses your pathway and you come to see me. You've
Mhm.
tried a lot of everything, the traditional approaches, and many people have also maybe even tried some emotional based approaches. So it's always a piece of that puzzle. Um, so I know I'm gonna have to deal with it. And a lot of times that will begin to come out when I begin to do hands-on manual work
Mhm.
because of just the connection of another human being with a touch, an
Yes.
empathetic touch. First of all, the type of touch matters, but it also happens just from my initial conversation because I sit down with them in an environment that's not a cold medical lab based environment that they might be used to going into. And I purposely design my office to where we sit down in chairs, kind of at a 45-degree angle to each other with a table in between. And I've offered them tea and we sit and we just start talking. And usually within, I mean, I could tell right away in that environment, but yeah, that there's emotion based stuff, but usually within 10, 15 minutes, the tears are flowing
Yeah. Yeah.
from people because they actually finally feel they're in an environment where somebody is listening to them and not looking at them like it's all in your head and I can't find this on whatever BS test you had, or they found all these different things on stuff and they've tried 50,000 supplements and stuff and they're still not where they need to be. And I know that because of how the mind and body and emotions affect all the systems of the body, that they're going to relate to each other. So, how you think and feel about yourself, about your pain, about your diagnosis, you know, impacts your blood flow and your lymph flow and your gut and your organs and your musculoskeletal system.
Yeah.
And everybody's been chasing those, you know, if you're lucky, like honestly, like if you're
Yeah.
lucky, people know to look at those things. But
Yes.
they really haven't said, you know what, there's a living, breathing, dynamic human being behind this diagnosis and all these medical jargon gobbledygook names that are thrown at you, even the body parts, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that's another thing when I teach, I always kind of make fun of that. Is like, I really don't care if you know what the hell the names are of all these blood vessels and lymph nodes and medical names, because just because you know the name doesn't mean you understand what the hell they're doing. and how they interact with each other. I just want you to know, that they're here. So for instance, I'll say, if you don't know what your mesenteric artery is, I don't care. You can call it a pencil.
Yeah.
I just want you to understand how your pencil here is relating to the piece of paper over there. So that also removes this air of being scared or overwhelmed or intimidated by your body because medicine made you feel that way, that it's outside my realm of, or even say, don't do this to yourself, don't do that to yourself. Like, it's myself. I can do whatever the hell I want to do to it.
Mm.
You just have to be empowered that you can. So to me, backing track on it is that there's always an emotional component to chronic pain. The people that come in to see me are ready to grasp that more than anyone else because they've got one hand remaining out of the quicksand before they completely go under. So,
Wow,
so they know there's something that's been missing, and that's a big piece of it.
that hand out the quicksand is a scary and startling image in your head too. So you talk about the conversation. Quite often just that conversation is enough to start the healing. Again, another thing that really sparked me to go off chasing down rabbit holes was I would get what I call hyper responders. People that walked in with seemingly, that they're at death's door and they can barely walk properly and all the rest of it, and they kind of run out the room after one session, shouting your name, and it was like, well, what I physically did with that person was nowhere near enough to have that response. And what I realized was there was something just in the relationship that had done most of the healing. I was a safe space for them to come. I looked at them as a whole being, and I did some other little bits that seemed to also help along the way. And they run off down the street, like Scrooge on Christmas morning kind of thing. And it's it's like, well, what on earth happened there? Because what I did, there was no way that was enough, right? It obviously was, but it was the relationship that really had the impact, right? And it took me probably years to truly understand that, I guess. So, all right, another one of your famous quotes is, if you're wondering what kind of people this might be useful for, the answer is yes. You
Yeah,
say that a lot, right?
I
But
say yes a lot.
are
Yeah.
you saying that most of the things you teach are useful for most of the people on Earth?
Everything that I teach is useful for everyone on the earth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because people get so caught up in everything, they give themselves so much anxiety and stress about, kind of like you said before, is that they're moving wrong, and they
Mm.
obsess about it, that they don't move naturally. And I have people do that all the time. Like, how many reps should I do? How many sets should I do? How many times a day can I do it? And like, I can't tell people that honestly because it's so individual. You just have
Yeah.
to start. So my answer to them is always yes. And they usually laugh. And then it sinks in of what I'm trying to tell them.
Mm.
Is that you'll figure it out. You'll go. But it also ties back into some of the other things that I said, is that more isn't always better, but better is better, because we have a tendency to want to supersize everything, at least here in the
Yes.
United States. And we go hashtag beast mode monster, go big or go home. But in my world, when you've been sick that long, you can't tolerate a lot of stuff, even the good stuff. And that's a big reason for therapeutic failure is therapeutic overload of different types. So I have to step back and do less, because they're just throwing so many things at a body that is saying, whoa, I appreciate what you're trying to do here, but I can't do anything with what I've got now, much less all these other things that you want me to do. And
Mm.
so the body has a way of protecting itself from that. One is it doesn't change at all. So I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to stay right here. And then you do all this stuff and I'm not changing. And another option is it's say, okay, well, I'm going to teach you a lesson. I'm going to push back really hard on you. And hopefully this time you're listening because I'm going to hurt you. And you get way worse. And then you think you did something wrong. It's not necessarily you did something wrong, but your body's telling you need to change something. And
Yeah.
usually it's like how much you're doing, which is a really, really big piece of the puzzle that I see. That I have to say, I tell people a lot of times you don't get better from what you start doing, but from what you stop doing. So I go through a lot of these different things of tell me what you're doing now. So then I usually have to do things. They get addition by subtraction. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I gotta peel all these things away because they get so stressed about that too. Like I got 15 things I have to do as part of my protocol. And that in and of itself is keeping them from getting better because they're already overwhelmed on their nervous system. And then that's sending them further into what I call the abyss. So I just started to say, chill, relax. The answer's yes. It's like movement. I don't really believe that there's a right way to move and a wrong way to move. It's just different ways to move. It's contextual because the right way to move in this environment would be not so much the right way you're going to move in that environment, but for each environment, it is right. So you need to be adaptable. It's called variation, variability, and variety. My friend
Yeah.
Joanne Elphinston, a physical therapist, always says that. That's change. That's resiliency. That's adaptability. So that's what I do with movement and exploring things like that. And that's one of the reasons I got out of teaching a lot of movement based rehab because I just wanted people to begin to explore movement on their own and
And
feel
that's
it.
such an important word, explore, isn't it? Like, I mean, going back to your point, like more isn't better. I talk to people about, it's about finding the sweet spot. It's not about finding the furthest away or the heaviest spot or the fastest spot. It's about finding your sweet spot. And everyone has their sweet spot in a slightly different place, and I use the analogy to, vibration. There's vibration machines out there that go from like 10 hertz to 100 hertz, but the body beyond about 35 hertz, you can't even process that level of vibration. So, but people going, well, okay, then if 35 hertz is really good, then I'm gonna hit people with 80 hertz, because then I'll get twice the benefit. Well, no, you're probably going to get half the benefit because now the body's like you're putting the body into a state of stress because he's got something that it's overwhelmed by. So you can have too much of a good thing. That was my basic point behind that, right?
Yep.
If broccoli is good, that doesn't mean that 20 heads of broccoli a day is better, right? So we've got this like for me, it's a concept of sweet spot, but then everyone's got to find their own sweet spot, which will move once you improve. So do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I learned from it was from a brilliant osteopath, Leon Chatow, who
Mhm.
passed away a few years ago. It was a quote in one of his presentations that I found, like an old one, surfing the internet. And as soon as I read that, I'm like, oh man, that's it. That's so insightful. He said, even therapeutic interventions are also stressors. And I said, that's brilliant. It is true. So that ties into exactly what we were saying, that these therapeutic interventions that are designed to help you heal, they're also stressors to your nervous system.
Mm.
So if you have chronic pain and autoimmune disease, I already know you have an overwhelmed nervous system.
Mhm.
And that kind of system is very easy to overwhelm. So if you do too many interventions, uh, too many repetitions, too often, right? And I see it all the time,
Yes.
then you hit a wall and you don't get better or you get worse. And those are the people that keep moving on to try the next thing. And I tried this and I tried this and I tried this and it didn't work because they're usually trying all of them at one time
Yeah.
anyway. But it's the same thing, not just the physical interventions, it's the emotional interventions. Like, you know that from being, if you're a trained therapist, you can't push into somebody's protective wall too quick because, it'll go up higher
Mm-hmm.
or they'll double down in protection because they know that you're going to rip this stuff away from me too soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to survive without what I'm using right now to keep myself breathing.
I
And
mean, you
it's the
can't take
same
away
thing
their
with the
identity.
physical.
That's the thing. Like that, if it, whether that identity is helping them or not, you can't just rip that away and go, okay, then. So what's there now? There's nothing there, and you're stressing the hell out of me. Help me rebuild. You know.
Well, that's I love that way of looking at it because that's what I have to tell people. As I always tell them, so listen, first of all, I need you to know that you're not broken and that your body is not trying to punish you. It's trying to heal you. It's doing the best it can with what it's got in the moment it's in to heal and protect. Its job is to protect you. And I say, yours is just really, really freaking good at it. Like, and
Mm.
then they all start smiling and they start laughing because that's what it is. And I tell people that all these strategies are our problem solving strategies for what these symptoms are. Um, they've been useful for your body up to this point,
Mm.
and it's gotten you where you needed to be, right? And it will probably continue to try to use those strategies all the time because it's worked up until now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I always tell people, I said, how do you know it's worked? And then I make them laugh again and I go, because you're not dead. Because as long as you're not dead, the strategies are working.
Yeah.
Because your brain and your body really don't care if you're happy and you look great and you're not a hot mess and you don't have pain. It would like it if you didn't have those. It doesn't want to suffer any more than you do.
Yeah.
But all those things come second to being dead.
Just about. So, so it would be remiss of me not to mention if people aren't following your Instagram page, Stop Chasing Pain, then you are incredibly generous on there with content. So,
Thank you.
but from my point of view, I guess as an educator, I want to say to you, how on earth do you find the energy to put the volume out that you do with the regularity and consistency that you do? That's my first question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, one, it's an easy answer because I absolutely love it. It's
Yeah.
it's who I am. It's part of my meaning in life. So I do it because I enjoy it. I don't do it because I'm supposed to do it or it's
Mm.
part of my job. And I was on there the other day and I realized I got close to almost 9,500 Instagram posts up. A lot. I've been doing it a long time. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's healing for me,
Yeah.
honestly. What I'm sure you know the feeling when you can put out some things like these quotes. I put those
Mm.
out on there, things that have helped me feel a little bit better, or they were a life preserver for a patient that I saw that it really helped them. I said, you know what, I'm going to share this with some other people, and that helps me feel good at the
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
time.
I mean, like I say, if people did nothing but follow your Insta feed, they would be enormously educated just by that. But they will also get the sense that okay, this guy's talking about some stuff. I don't know enough about that, but I'm particularly, and just jump in. My advice would be just jump in on the things that really spark your own interest. So as another question, just again, like I'm just being very
Mhm.
self-indulgent here. Do you find that despite effectively sharing and giving, it's not giving away, it's sharing, despite sharing so much, that there are still a sufficient volume of people that connect with that, and they're avid followers of that, but they'll still go on to do some of your education. I feel like a lot of people might go there, well, I've got it all now because I've seen his Instagram posts, which we obviously
Yeah.
know are some headlines. So how does that work together? You find that your volume helps with the volume of people that also want to come to you and spend some money with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've never even thought about twice about that, of I'm putting too much stuff out here. I won't give I come from a position of abundance, not lack. It's a
Yeah.
mindset anyway, and there's always somebody else that you can help. And I'll always keep, I've been putting out stuff for 15 years. I mean,
Mm.
I've had my podcast for 15. I had a podcast for anybody who knew what in the world the podcast was,
Yeah.
and all these different things. So just go them out. And then that's kind of, I always tell people it's from a giving kind of mindset,
Yeah.
not of the, what can I get from this
No,
kind of
absolutely.
mindset, which I've never, ever had. I just like to put stuff out there. And the idea behind these posts is I put just enough there to spark your thought, or to have you pull a string to say, that's very interesting. I never thought about that before. And then they get curious, right?
Yeah.
And then that's how, because what I like to do is I like to take many different things, and then stuff that you might not see how they're connected or related, but then I'll start to show you that they are. And then that's when for me, that's where the excitement comes in, like, oh, wow, that's quite fascinating. Right. And then boom, then they're off.
It's so much fun, and I love that you do that too. And for people like me that see that there's more to the picture than the one thing, it's just reassuring. Like it's just so nice to have the like-minded folk out there that you can connect with, and making such a big impact on the world. So my final question for you, because I know
Yes.
you need to run away now. So what do you want for you and everyone else in the world?
Oh, that's a good question. Uh, that's a really good question. Well, people always ask me, what do I do? Like, what's your job? What these workshops and stuff that you're teaching? And I thought about that, and I said, you know what? I'm actually what I'm trying to do is to get people to think. That's my jam. Like, to start to think differently and be able to put these puzzle pieces back together for yourself. And that's the whole goal of my uh workshops, is have that empowerment of healing through your thinking. That's my goal.
I think that's a great place to pause for thought, because I know you've given so much thought provocation to everyone with this last hour or hour and a bit. So thank you so much for being so generous with your time. Um, have you got any final message for that audience out there that you'd want to say that you feel like we haven't kind of communicated during the course of this discussion?
Yeah, well, we had a lot of great stuff. First of all, it was a very fun conversation. Thank you. And thanks for revisiting some of my quotes. I had forgotten some of them that I said, and I was saying to myself, man, I had some pretty good ones there. Honestly, over the, with 9,000 posts, I guess I've said a couple of things that stood out in there, you know. But I think one of just reiterating to everybody of what we touched on before is that your body's always doing the best it can with what it's got in the moment it's in right now to heal and protect you. And I think the other one is just to kind of send home one of the things that I teach everybody about all these different systems of the body is that they all work together. They don't
Yeah,
work by themselves. There's no such thing as an isolated injury somewhere. There's no such thing as isolated healing. It's all one piece. Everything is felt everywhere with whatever happens to the physical body or whatever you feel or think about up in here. And that should not hopefully be overwhelming to you, but actually comforting.
yes,
That you know that everything inside of you is working together at its best to try to keep you out of pain and from suffering. And if you just come at it from that mindset from the get-go, that actually is healing and
yeah.
helps you feel better. You don't feel so alone or isolated or broken or damaged because you're not.
Well, once again, Dr. Perry Nickelston, thank you for this conversation today, but also thank you for the last 25 years of work as well.
Thank you, my friend. Uber ditto right back at you.
Thanks, buddy.